So if we think about, things that are going to be, again, like this is about sort of like mitigating a risk from the police officer's perspective. And this doesn't necessarily mean that they're right, but these are, things that we have to be aware of, right? Because, situations that are unpredictable or shifting, are more dangerous, right? And we can't really assume that police officers are, they're not security people, right? They're not expected to throw themselves like in front of bullets to protect people. They're allowed to be, afraid and like fearful and to manage their own risk, right? We don't expect them to be like completely, like selfless, like all the time, right? Maybe we think about that as an ideal, but that's really, just like not practical. So when we think about things that, are really going to get, change, right? So if we start talking about neighborhood context, which I'm abbreviating as NC, think with NC, right, is that, we know that police are going to show up more in like high crime areas. And because of this like high crime area kind of problem, right, this is typically going to be like violent crime, right? We're not necessarily patrolling the streets for like property crime. That's more of a secondary issue, right? Because you have insurance, things can be replaced if it's like a burglary, right? Maybe you would be, doing something after the fact, right? But you tend to be drawn into more like violent stuff, right? Because has more like, imminent life threat, right? So, so it's life threatening. And you deal with people who, are using, weapons or not. There's like a lot of like, physical and social disorder. And, as a result of this kind of like discretionary problem, right? Any kind of changes or relative to like stuff like that, we see officers are more likely to use, like an arrest power or use of force. They're more likely to, search and seize in these kinds of contexts, right? Um, you know, Now the part, of course, that makes this also like a problem, right, where you have like, this decision, right, is that you start noticing disparities in official data related to across like race, right? Race and ethnicity, because typically in more impoverished, high crime kind of areas, where it tends to be the places where like black and brown people typically live. And so you see officers who are taking more risks or risk management stuff, right, to do searches and stuff. Um, it starts becoming a problem, right? Because you are, you know, there's this disparity between, the search, stop, use of force rates between these people, right? And, a lot of times, right, this may in fact be like an implicit bias that's happening, right? Um, and part of it is this also associated between your contact and suspicion that's built up, right? And this is part of the problem with policing, right? Is that because there's so much power attached to these police decisions, right? I mean, these aren't like neutral decisions that an officer makes, right? You're talking about the police have the ability to dramatically alter the life of a black or brown, Hispanic, Latino, whoever person, forever because of this, right? And again, I'm not saying that to excuse the police behavior. I'm just adding context to it as a partial, explanation as to why it happens, right? And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done in this area, right? Because if this power is abused, right, you are dramatically affecting not only like the neighborhood but also the life of the individual that's being targeted for police action, right? But moving on, right? We also have these issues, right, where you have issues like with suspect kind of stuff, and where you take cues and you're trying to like maybe can prevent harm, right? So if people are acting be strangely, right, whether it's not like my mom who says like weird stuff sometimes, right? But if we're talking about people who have like a mental health concern going on, right? Or if it is something, someone is like, alcohol related or possibly drinking, or excuse me, drugs, like a narcotic of some kind. this becomes a problem then, right? Because this kind of stuff use is going to create like this mind altering pattern. And because this mind altering kind of pattern or the status, right? This, is like because people, if you don't have experience working with these kinds of people, or maybe you do have a lot of experience in something like that, the unpredictability creates a problem. So with this kind of like unpredictable, kind of stuff, right? It creates a problem because an officer then wants to manage the risk, associated with unpredictability because it could be a danger for that person to themselves, it could be a danger to that officer, or depending on the context, right? Um, it could be another issue, right? It's also true for like demeanor if you're at like hostile or versus calm, if you're compliant or not, right? All these things are going to affect like how an officer chooses to encounter a situation, escalate it, or not.